This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is July the 4th, 2025. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Our wonderful independent republic has been thoroughly subverted by the enemy, and the enemy is now positioning to put us into gulags, into concentration camps, in the very land that our forefathers fought for. Allegedly, Benjamin Franklin predicted all of this. I'm going to be explaining 4 very significant Kabbalistic principles which are behind what is happening today. First of all, since it's the 4th of July, I want to let everyone know the Kabbalistic view of why it is that Europeans celebrate their holidays and festivals with fire and fireworks. It is because they believe that ultimately Edom, will be consumed by the fires of Jacob, the Jews. And they also believe that we Europeans, white people, are Esau, the Roman, Edomite, Amalekite Christians of the West. So, though the Edomites don't realize it, the reason that they have bonfires and fireworks is because they are fated and slated to eventually be rendered into ash by Jacob, by nuclear bombs, by being incinerated and reduced to ashes. The Jews, on the other hand, are the dust of the earth and the children of God. And the Gentiles are doomed to be cast into the lake of fire of hell, Gehenna. So in every sense, the Gentiles are to be eradicated, exterminated, and consumed by fire and reduced into ash. So happy 4th of July. Enjoy your fireworks. They also say that's why Gentiles smoke tobacco, is because it represents the fact that ultimately they will be consumed by the fires of Jacob. And furthermore, Catholics put the cross on their forehead on Ash Wednesday to signify the fact that they are slated, as the Romans, to be reduced into ashes and cast into the lake of fire after being burned up and having everything that represents them consumed in flames and reduced to the stubble of ashes. The memory of Amalek, the memory of the Edomites, is to be blotted out, and it's going to be blotted out by being consumed in fire, I expect, by the fires of nuclear weapons. That's the first Kabbalistic principle I'm going to go into greater depth about and explain to all you good people on this wonderful 4th of July. The second one is that everything which ought to be good for the Gentiles instead does them harm. Everything which should be beneficial hurts them. Everything that should provide them with sustenance, health, and life instead exterminates them. And this includes Christianity, which is a Jewish subversion that ought to give them immortality in their minds, but instead will blot them out of history. It includes doctors and lawyers. There's a famous letter that was recorded by a Spaniard in which the Jews said that they should become the doctors and the lawyers and the politicians so that they can poison the Gentiles to death, destroy their lives, ruin them in the courts and defend Jews, and etc. And the politicians subvert the whole nation. The Nazis, who were supposed to benefit the Gentiles by fighting the enemy, instead destroyed all of Europe, gave over all of Eastern Europe to Stalin, invited him into Berlin, and created the nation of Israel. So all of these things that the Gentiles believe will benefit them instead do them great harm and lead to their eventual extermination. The communists portrayed themselves as fighting against the Jewish bankers and the big Jewish capitalists, but instead they were working for the Jewish bankers and the big Jewish capitalists to enslave the proletariat, the working class, under the yoke of Jewish commissars, as immediately happened after the Bolshevik Revolution. The Jews gave Hezbollah pagers that were supposed to help them communicate in their war against the enemy, but they instead blew up in their faces and blew up in their groins and took their fingers and hands apart. So this is a very fundamental Kabbalistic principle, is this idea that everything which ought to be beneficial to the Gentiles instead harms them and eventually leads to their extermination. The other side of that, the flip side of that coin, the Gentiles represent the Sitra Achra, the wicked side, the anus, the backside, the left-hand side, the unholy side, and Jews supposedly represent the holy side, the good side, the front side, the face. So everything that the Gentiles do, which is meant to harm the Jews, instead benefits the Jews by making it illegal for Jews to own farmland or be farmers or work in the guilds and the trades, keeping the Jews out of professions, keeping Jews out of the government. Instead fulfilled that ancient plan of Deuteronomy for Jews to become usurers and take over the world for usury. Though that's pinned on the Christians, Deuteronomy in 3 places, I believe chapters 15, 23, and 28, states that the Jews are to use usury to take over the world. And again, that predates Christianity by 300 years. And then they engineered Christianity. There's a passage in Luke where Christians aren't supposed to engage in usury or lend at interest. And in that way, the Jews monopolized the lending of money at interest. And though loans ought to empower Gentiles and help them, they instead do them harm because they're charged at usurious rates. And all of this preventing Jews from working in the guilds and professions and in the government, etc., supposedly forced the Jews to engage in usury. So that which was meant to harm the Jews instead benefited the Jews and ultimately leads to their conquest over the Gentiles and the destruction of the Gentiles, which leaves the Jews alone, standing on the face of the earth. The Nazis were supposed to do terrible harm to the Jews and exterminate them, supposedly. But instead, they empowered international communism to take over most of Europe, and it was intended to take over all of Europe and all of the world. So the Nazis actually helped the messianic plan of communism to create a world government to be ruled from Jerusalem by the Messiah of the Jews in Zionist Israel. And that's how Zionism and communism work together. So Nazism created Israel for the Jews and helped to greatly expand the Soviet Union into the Warsaw Pact and set up communism in China, North Korea, and Vietnam. Those are all products of the Nazis. And the Imperial Japanese, who were also backed by the Jews, going all the way back to Jacob Schiff, financing Imperial Japan against the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War and providing Russian POWs with communist propaganda when they were held by the Imperial Japanese. Anti-Semitism in general is a fundamental principle of Judaism that Esau hates Jacob, which prevents the assimilation of Jews into Gentiles and their disappearance, their extermination through assimilation. So anti-Semitism, which is meant to harm the Jews, instead benefits the Jews. Anti-Semitism led Pharaoh into the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army, which was then consumed by the Red Sea. The hatred of the Jews is always meant to be a trap that leads, predictably, the Gentiles into their own demise. So everything that's intended to harm the Jews instead benefits them. The Jews believe that they have to be tested to cleanse out the souls and the blood of the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav. So tempting them with Christianity, which they perceive to be Satan worship and idolatry, benefits them by weeding out the bloodlines of the Gentiles that have intermixed with their own. And this is a very fundamental concept in Kabbalah, that what is meant to help the Gentiles instead exterminates them, and what is meant to exterminate the Jews instead causes them to persevere and be preserved and triumph over the Gentiles and exterminate the Gentiles. The third principle that I'm going to be discussing is the Haman principle. And this is the Kabbalistic and Judaic principle that when Haman constructs a gallows to harm the Jewish people, Haman will instead be hung from it, together with his 10 sons and together with all Amalekites who will be exterminated on the very gallows that they erected to exterminate the Jews. And this is part of the fourth Kabbalistic principle of subverting the Gentiles with crypto-Jews and duplicitous politicians. And this gets into the school of political philosophy of Leo Strauss, who I discuss so often. Leo Strauss, Straussian politics, the noble lie of Plato. Leo Strauss was good friends with Gershom Scholem, and a lot of Kabbalah made its way into the political philosophies of Strauss. And Strauss's political philosophy was that Jacob tricks Esau to manipulate Esau into doing what Esau thinks will be for his benefit, but instead, with Straussian politics, all that does is pander to a specific base to get a specific set of politicians elected to then flip after the election and do the exact opposite in a complete betrayal of the very electorate that they initially pandered to. And an example of that was Ronald Reagan, who was very much a Straussian neoconservative politician who promised to expel the illegal aliens from America and got elected based upon those promises, those false promises. He pandered to a base that wanted to see the illegal aliens deported, so they put him into power. Once he got into power, he granted the largest amnesty in American history to illegal aliens, which enabled 2.7 million to 3 million illegal aliens to be granted amnesty and remain in the United States. That is very much in league with the Kabbalah of Haman. This idea that the people who wanted to deport the illegal aliens were instead misled and duped into voting for a politician who would instead grant them amnesty. The exact opposite of what they wanted to happen, they were duped into making happen. They were betrayed, and they got the exact opposite result of what they intended. Haman built gallows to hang Jews on, and instead Haman, his sons, and the Amalekites were hung on those very gallows. And that is exactly what Straussian politics is all about, together with tricking the Gentiles into obliging that plan and fulfilling that plan themselves. Donald Trump is now doing that to the American people. He pandered to a base of people, the vast majority of Americans today who want to see the illegal aliens who have flooded into our nation deported. And he said he was going to do that, and he was going to build a wall to keep them from ever coming back. And he has now flipped, exactly like Reagan did. But he's taken it a step further than Reagan, and he is now really fully implementing the Kabbalistic Haman principle. The very people who got him elected on that platform of expelling and deporting the illegal aliens stepped into the trap of believing that they were building the gallows upon which these illegal aliens would be hung. And these are the concentration camps that Trump is building, the gulags. He's building a gulag infrastructure. But he has now made it clear that he's instead going to be granting asylum and amnesty to these illegals. So who are these gallows being constructed for? They are being constructed for the very people that voted Trump into office to deport the illegal aliens, the anti-Semites and the white people. The Jews perceive all white people as genetically and inherently anti-Semitic because they have the DNA and the souls of the Romans, the Edomites, who expelled the Jews from Judea, who destroyed the temple, and who initiated the fourth Roman exile. So Haman is going to be hung on the gallows that Haman built. The white people are going to be sent into these gulags, into these concentration camps. It will start with the so-called anti-Semites, and then as America is flooded with more and more non-white people, it will be all non-white people. So in the name of combating illegal immigration, for which he was elected, Trump is building the gallows on which he's going to hang Haman and the Amalekites. So let's, and Trump is setting up this process. We know this is coming because he has been revoking visas for anyone who criticizes Israel. At the same time, he is opening up H-1B visas for Indians and Chinese and everyone else to come into America, as long as their social media shows that they don't say anything naughty about Jews or Israel. He is also threatening to cancel naturalized citizenship for naturalized citizens who have ever criticized Jews or Israel out of self-defense. That will progress into canceling the citizenship of anti-Semites who are natural-born citizens, and eventually all white people. We're all going to be hung on the gallows that we helped Trump to build. In the name of saving us, he is arranging to exterminate us. So let's start getting into the proof of what I just laid out for you. In Obadiah, in the Grand Old Testament, it states in verse 18, "And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken it." Esau represents Rome, represents Christendom, the West, Europeans in general, white people in general. The reason we're going to have fireworks going off tonight, according to the Kabbalists, is because this is our fate, to be blown to smithereens to be burned and rendered into ash, to cease to exist, and to have our demonic souls return to their Father in the lake of fire of hell in Gehenna. And they dupe the gullible Gentiles. Jacob always tricks Esau into doing this themselves. They've set up the system of mutually assured destruction so that the Russians and Americans burn themselves up in fire. And the nuclear weapons, which were meant to preserve and save us, instead eradicate us. That is that Kabbalistic principle that what is intended to do us good instead does us existential harm and eradicates us. And in the name of fighting the communist Jews of the Soviet Union, this fighting those Jews instead preserves the Jews, because the Gentiles, the Leviathan and the Behemoth, will kill each other off. And I'm going to show you a picture of Alligator Alcatraz. Let's go to that right now. Here is the Antichrist of the Gentile side, Donald Trump, Messiah, son of Joseph, depicting ice, as in Siberian America, the gulags they're going to build in Greenland and Canada, if they can get away with it. Depicting 3 alligators, meaning the father, Samael, the mother, the Holy Ghost of Lilith, and the Son, Jesus Christ. This represents the Trinity of the Leviathan. The Trinity of the Leviathan is primarily the Roman Catholic Church, the Romans in general, meaning all Europeans and white people, especially the seafaring people of America and the United Kingdom. We are the Leviathan, to be pitted against the Behemoth and consume each other in a mutually destructive war that will annihilate us from existence and leave only the Jews standing in their world to come, Olam Haba, and the present world, Olam Hazeh, will give way to a new heavens and a new earth in which we no longer exist. And this is being portrayed in our eventually being sent to gulags as the Christians, as Samael the Father, as Lilith the Holy Ghost, and as Jesus Christ the Son, representing us, to be sacrificed to Samael the scapegoat, to be consumed on Yom Kippur. This is also represented by the pythons, which they have put into the swamps surrounding Alligator Alcatraz. Since Trump is now saying he's going to grant amnesty to the illegals, these concentration camps, this gulag infrastructure, is built for us. Anti-Semites will be shoved in first, and then all white people. And if he gets his hands on Greenland and on Canada, he will create an American Siberia from Alaska to Greenland and send all Europeans from continental Europe, from the UK, from Australia, from all of North America into those gulags where they will exterminate us, because they view us as the Edomites of the North, the Hyperboreans. And they see that as a fitting fate. That's why they did that to the Russians in the gulags in Siberia. Trotsky, Lenin, and the whole crew of Jews that ran the Soviet Union were all Kabbalists, very sophisticated, very knowledgeable Kabbalists. And that's what Alligator Alcatraz represents. So I'm now going to break away to my paid subscribers on CJBbooks.substack.com. If you'd like to see the rest of this presentation, please be sure and get a subscription there, and you will be able to see the full videos. And also, please visit my website, CJBbooks.com. If you appreciate this content, you can contribute there or in the links in the description below. I have Buy Me a Coffee links, PayPal links, and cryptocurrency wallet. And I want to thank everyone who has contributed to make this possible. If you do get a paid subscription at my account at CJBbooks.substack.com, you'll be able to see all of my full videos, my past several videos, and everything going forward, and you won't miss out on anything, and you'll get the full education that is needed to help you to survive what is coming.